Sometimes so much it hurts. You can taste it. You feel like you would do anything to get it. Go further than they'd suspect. Twist your soul and crush what's in your way. Then you get it, and something happens. You become the object of your desire. There ends the reading. That was from a perfume ad in a Macy's store window. Twist your soul, crush what's in your way, and then you become the object of your desire. What does that even mean? Does that mean you're finally satisfied with yourself? You feel good about yourself? And this perfume is supposed to help with that? If only, right? If only. We have a new committee this year, one that Michael referred to in his leadership moment. It's called the Radical Generosity Team. This week, somebody asked if their name is related to the book Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. It's a book about self-acceptance. The names are not related, but one thing I do know as a minister is how many people struggle with self-acceptance. A lot of people struggle with feeling good enough, with feeling worthy. It keeps them from believing they can be happy. It's like unpleasant background music. They tune it out, but when other noise in their lives dies down, it's still there playing. Ugh. Even people that others would never suspect struggle with this. Successful people often live with a surprising amount of self-doubt. Sometimes when people pursue great achievements, they do so partly because they hope it will cure their feelings of unworthiness. The Radical Generosity Team was not named after that book, but maybe they should have been, because how we regard ourselves and whether we have a feeling of abundance and generosity or of scarcity and grasping are definitely connected. This is the time of year when we ask you to consider making a financial pledge to the church, and the Radical Generosity Team is tasked with designing the campaign. That's part of who they are. And thank goodness, because when ministers do it alone, it can get pretty dicey. None of us goes into the ministry for the love of fundraising. We don't even get any formal training on it. And so sometimes you'll see situations like the one that happened in England, where 3 priests went around showing off their knickers, that's underwear in the UK, people, to inspire people to give. The knickers were under their vestments, and they were described as comedy style. I'm not sure what that visual is supposed to bring to mind, but I want you to stop trying to picture it immediately. Your ministers have too much dignity for that kind of thing. We would make the intern do it. Luckily, we don't have to, because the Radical Generosity Team is on the job. And so for the next few weeks, you'll hear leadership moments like the one you just heard, from Michael, who is a longtime member reflecting on his spiritual growth. We'll also hear from a retired couple considering ways to leave a lasting legacy in the world. We'll hear from a man who immigrated to the U.S. and together with his family found a spiritual home at First Unitarian. And finally, from 2 college students who grew up in this congregation. You'll be offered a pledge packet, a packet of information about making a pledge, and I hope you will take a look at it. It has been prepared by volunteers, by people like you. Our church, as Judy alluded just now, is member-supported, which means that well over 90% of our funding comes from your contributions. The rest helps, but it's small potatoes compared to that. We get a bit from our small but steadily growing endowment, and some income from renting out church spaces, mostly. But there's no national body giving us money. We're it. Now, a really fun, probably the most fun part of the campaign is happening today, and that's the party. No money is being collected. We hope you'll pick up the packet of info. Anybody who does gets free tickets to the ice cream sundae bar. But you don't have to turn anything in today. And even if you did, a pledge is not a check. It's just a statement you write about how much money you plan to give in the coming year. So stay for the party and enjoy live jazz in the courtyard while you're there. Later, at home, taking your time looking through the packet. It's different from other kinds of appeals that you might get. You're here. This is your church. It's personal to you. But it's also more than that. It's a way of doing and being more together than any of us could on our own. Now, the Radical Generosity team isn't just a group of volunteers who ask for pledges and throw parties. They're also charged with nurturing and shining a light on the general spirit of generosity in our church, not just in terms of giving to the church, but also how we express a spirit of generosity to each other. Like this summer, when a small group came together and provided daily visits to a member with no family nearby who had been hit by a car on his bicycle, and he ended up facing a long recovery. The team also nurtures and shines a light on the church as an institution, being generous to its members and to the wider community. So you can expect to hear cool and inspiring things from them all throughout the year, and not just during this campaign. I'm also going to talk a little bit more this year about money and generosity. And if it makes you bristle a little bit, you're not alone. One member of the team quipped that talking about money is like talking about sex. But you know we haven't shied away from that around here either. And why should we? Money and sex are two things like family and love and forgiveness and the soul that we think about and live with all throughout our lives. And because of the larger culture in which we live, money is tied up with whether we believe and behave as though we are the authors of our own meaningful lives, or whether we look like we are controlled by something beyond ourselves. I think if we take a look around, it's fair to ask, do we possess money, or does it possess us? What do we own? Do we really own anything? Anyone who has experienced a long period of unemployment or sudden loss of your health or a bad house fire, or anyone who's just had a bad streak of bad luck, knows that the things we think are ours, that we truly wish were truly ours, can disappear, making it seem as though we were holding nothing more solid than a handful of water the whole time. To whom do they really belong, these material things, these bodies that we have too? To the universe. We are mere custodians. We can't take them with us, as they say. And we're custodians of money too. Like canyon walls and gravity and winds that direct the flow of a stream, as custodians, we can shape the direction that money flows too. But as a wise person once said, if you don't tell your money where to go, it will go away. As though it had evaporated, right? I think we all have experience with that. And if you aren't intentional about directing its flow in your life, you can find yourself caught up in the flow instead of directing it. So maybe you can't truly possess it, but you can kind of become possessed by it. You know this has happened when, no matter how much you have, you always want more. And maybe you always feel broke. When you work more than you want to, more than you can really sustain with your health, just to keep up a certain lifestyle or to keep up with the bills. Actually, our whole country behaves rather as though it were possessed. When did the American people come to be called consumers more often than citizens? Makes us sound like zombies. And meanwhile, money keeps flowing in one direction toward the people who already have ridiculous amounts of it. Because these things have moral and spiritual repercussions, I want to highlight another group of volunteers in our church, the Economic Reform Group that formed a few years ago. If systemic change interests you and you'd like to have some influence on it in New Mexico, you might be interested in the Public Banking Symposium they're holding in this sanctuary on Saturday, November 7th at 8:30 a.m. I'll give them a little plug. There's an old Sufi story about the importance of cultivating generosity, which asks the question, why does the beggar beg? A beggar sits on the main street all day crying, "Bakshish, bakshish, who will give me bakshish?" Bakshish is a small amount of money, like alms, given to someone in need. Some people walk right by without looking at him. Some give him a few coins. And some give him more than bakshish, dropping in the equivalent of $20 bills or more. But no matter what they give, even if they don't give him anything, he praises them and asks that Allah bless them. Then, at the end of the day, he gets up and goes over to a prayer fountain and tosses everything in. He leaves without the money, going home to his middle-class house. I've heard contemporary stories that sound kind of like this one, stories in which we're warned that someone who appears to be in need may be trying to dupe us. They're going to use your money for drugs, the stories go. Or they could get a job, but they're too lazy. I always think people who say that must have really horrible jobs. Whenever I hear that, I want to say, what are you, like Donald Trump's stylist? You think standing in the sun for 8 hours on a busy street on an 18-inch median looks relaxing? I promise I'll pick on someone else next sermon. The moral of these stories, of course, is that giving is risky because the receiver probably has some nefarious hidden goal, right? Is this Sufi story like that? Why does the beggar in the Sufi story beg if he doesn't really need the money? The last line of the story answers, "He begs for me and for thee." The point being, of course, that sharing is a spiritual practice with value in and of itself. The Buddha also understood this. He taught that by giving to others, we are liberated from attachment and from the illusion of separateness. Generosity is an expression of unconditional caring. Here's $1, not here's $1 as long as you don't use it to self-medicate for your pain. In the Jewish scriptures, teachings on generosity abound. It's basic and a sacred duty. In Proverbs, it is written, "Whoever closes his ear to the cry of the poor will himself call out and not be answered." In the Christian scriptures, Jesus is so generous that it's downright threatening to today's status quo. People gloss over the part of the Gospels in which it is written, "If anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him?" And sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. The Pope, who's been in the news a lot this week, makes some people nervous when he says that humanity should be served by wealth, not ruled by it. He gets accused of being a Marxist sometimes for comments like that, but is it really such a radical idea to say that money should serve humankind and not the other way around? By the way, it isn't just cute that he drives a Fiat. Fiat is a Latin word that appears in the New Testament, and it means, "let it be done." My husband and son will be thrilled and feel justified knowing that cars can be a form of prayer. How would your spending habits and attitude toward earning or receiving money change if you saw money as something that exists to serve humanity and as an opportunity to practice unconditional kindness and non-attachment, as a sign of inner abundance? How does your sense of self-worth and meaning grow when you practice radical generosity? As this holiday season approaches, I challenge you to make a change. It could be a small one, something that works for you. Here's one idea. Maybe you've been giving just a few dollars here and there to First Unitarian, kind of like tipping God, right? Add it up in your mind. Grab one of those pledge packets and write it down on a pledge form. If it doesn't add up to reflect the value of spirituality and of this place in your life, erase it and write in another number that you can live with. It may still be modest. That's okay. The important thing is that it's intentional. That's the change. As custodians of the things we seem to possess, let us look for ways to align them, to align their energy and their power, not with the whims of an era or a culture, but with our essential selves, and let them be in service to something higher. May all that we do, the meditations of our hearts, the words of our lips, and the stewardship of our energies and resources be of service to love. And with that closing thought, my friends, let us party. We have a short service today. You will have noticed by now that we cut some things out so let there be more time for the fun. Wojtek is going to play some music as you make your way out. Blessings to you on this day.